We'll start. You can repeat after me. Om Sadashivasamarambham
सदाशिवसमारम्भाम्
Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham karishyami Siddhir me sada Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnanapradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitarthaya Tattvabodho Bhidiyate Namah Shivaya. Let's start. Right. So last time we started with the text, and this is the first verse in the text. The meaning was that the author is offering namaskara to his guru. And who is his guru? Vasudevendra, who is what? A great yogi. Yogi here means Jnani. So a great Jnani, Vasudevendra, who gave me the knowledge. To this guru, I offer my namaskara before I'm starting this text. And what is this text? Tattva Bodha. I'm presenting a text called Tattva Bodha. And for whose benefit? For the benefit of the Mumukshus. Mumukshus are those people who desire moksha. So one who desires moksha is called a mumukshu. So for the benefit, to help out these mumukshus, I am presenting a text here called Tattva Bodha. And as the name itself suggests, it will be about the knowledge of reality, about who am I. This self-knowledge will be revealed in this text. So this was his prayer verse, which he started with. And with him, of course, we also pray for successful completion of the text as well as successful assimilation of this knowledge. Okay, now we can move on and see the introductory line given by the author. And we can read this, then we can discuss. Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampannadhikarinam
Sampurna Adinarinam
Moksha sadhana bhutam
Moksha
Tattva viveka prakaram
Tatvivekapakaram
Vakshyamaha.
Vakshamaha.
All right. So this is the author's introductory line to the chapter. And it's a very beautiful line because in just this one line, he has covered a lot of important points that introduces us to the text. So we'll start with this word here, Tattva Viveka Prakaram. So if the question comes, what is the, 1 minute. If the question is asked, what is the subject of this text? What am I going to teach? What is the topic under discussion? Then the answer is Tattva Viveka Prakaram. So this is his introduction. Now, the word Tattva, we have already seen, it means reality or essence or higher truth. The word Viveka in this context means analysis or enquiry. The word Prakaram means methodology or procedure. So he is going to talk about the procedure of self-enquiry. So in this text, the methodology of self-enquiry he is going to cover. Now, when you talk about the word Tattva, it means reality, reality of myself. The question of who am I? I request everyone to stay on mute, otherwise it will disturb the recording also. Right. So the word Tattva, which means reality of myself. The question, who am I? Really, who am I? And what is the nature of this world? What is the nature of me? All of this is covered by the word Tattva. Now you may say that I already know who I am. I already know what the world is. I can see it very clearly around me, right? But here, the author is implying that what you think or what you perceive need not be the reality, right? Now, even physics tells us this, that the wall in front of you is made up of molecules, atoms, and that molecule, an atom has 90% empty space. And then there are subatomic particles and then further even smaller particles. And in fact, they are not even visible. They are not even matter. You cannot even really call them matter, right? They are more of energy, basically. So the wall in front of you is basically energy and empty space, but it appears like a solid wall, right? So what you perceive need not actually be what the thing is. Now, when it comes to us as human beings, there are two layers of problems. The first layer of the problem is ignorance. I don't know who I am. The second layer of the problem is error. Because I don't know who I am, I think I am something else. I think I am a human being. I think I'm a girl. I think I'm this body. I think I'm an Indian. I think I'm an engineer or a doctor. So all of these things come. Why? Because I don't know who I am. So there is ignorance plus self-error. So to help you with an example, have you heard of this movie called Tarzan?
Medaji, I'm sorry for interrupting. What is the first problem? First layer of problem?
Ignorance.
Thank you, Medaji.
So ignorance plus self-error or self-misconception. So there is a movie called Tarzan. You may be familiar. So in that movie, there is a small boy, a baby, and his parents are killed and he's in the jungle. And then he is adopted by a group of gorillas. And these gorillas raise this young boy. And now this boy, he grows up thinking he is also a gorilla. So he behaves like the gorillas, he eats like the gorillas, and overall he believes that he is a gorilla, right? But actually he is a human being. So you see, there are two layers to his problem. First of all, he doesn't know that he's a human being. Secondly, he thinks he is a gorilla. So there is ignorance that I am a human being, and there is error that I am a gorilla. So when it comes to us, we have the same kind of problem. First, we don't know who we are. We don't know what I am or who am I. And the second, I think I am all these different things. I think I'm the body. I think I am my nationality. I think I am my gender. I think I am my profession. I think I am the role I play, a mother or a wife or a this or that, right? We go into all of these identifications with all the different roles that we play. So how do we correct this problem? First, you have to be told you are not this. Tarzan has to be told you are not a gorilla. Once he believes or once he understands that he is not a gorilla, then you can tell him you are a human being actually. So once we understand we are not all these different things, then our true nature can be revealed to us. Okay, and this is a matter for inquiry, for analysis. Why? Because the problem is of an intellectual nature. The solution also has to be of an intellectual nature. The problem is an intellectual mix-up, and so we need to provide a way to resolve this confusion in an intellectual manner, and that is why Viveka. Viveka means analysis or inquiry. It means that intellect is very much required to dissect this problem, to understand what is happening. Okay, just like in, to give you another example of this kind of confusion between perception and knowledge. A very famous example is the sun rising. So for many years, people believed that the sun actually rose in the west and in the east and set in the west, right? They thought that the sun is moving around the earth. But actually, what is the case? Sun is where it is. The earth is moving around the sun. And because of the rotational movement of the earth, it appears as though sun is rising and sun is setting. So perception tells you one thing, but knowledge tells you another thing. So for this, we need intellect. To understand even the sun rising and setting, you require intellect. So here also, we require intellect. We need to analyze the problem and then come to a solution. So that is why Viveka, an intellectual inquiry, is necessary regarding what? Regarding Tattva, the essence, the reality of who I am. Now, there is a method to do all this, right? Suppose in mathematics, you come across a mathematical problem statement. You cannot just randomly do whatever you like, right? There are certain formulas given, certain mathematical rules that you have to follow. And when you follow these procedures, then you are able to detangle the problem. In the same way, when it comes to this Vedanta subject also, when it comes to Atma Jnanam, there is a methodology of doing this self-inquiry. And so the author is telling that I will take you through this self-inquiry using the proper methodology. I will use the proper sampradaya. Sampradaya means the methodology. I will take you through this and give you self-knowledge. Why? Because self-inquiry leads to self-knowledge. Any subject you inquire into will give you knowledge on that subject. If you inquire into physics, you will get physics knowledge. If you inquire into self, you will get self-knowledge, right? So this is the subject of this text. We are going to be doing self-inquiry using the methodology as given by scriptures, and you will get self-knowledge. Okay, this is the first question and answer, which is what is the subject of this text? Now, if you ask, what is the benefit of doing all this? Another valid question. Why should I do all this? What is the purpose? So he says, moksha sadhana bhutam. This tattva viveka prakaram, this self-enquiry, is the means for moksha. Okay, it is the only means for moksha. This is not said here directly, but it has to be supplied that this is the only means for moksha. So suppose somebody comes and says, why all this intellectual business? I'm not interested. I came here for moksha. Why are you talking about intellect and knowledge and all these things? Give me moksha. Put your hand on my head and give me moksha. Right? It doesn't work that way. Nobody can put their hand on your head and then moksha will spontaneously arise. That doesn't happen. The route to moksha is self-enquiry. So that's why he says, moksha sadhana bhutam. Sadhana means, the way, a tool or an instrument. So the means for moksha is this tattva viveka prakaram. So this is the only way to get moksha. And what is moksha? We have discussed in great detail in the first class, all those 5 points. So I hope you remember. And what is the benefit of having all those 5 points? It improves the quality of your own life. And not just your own life, but also the life of everyone around you. So the quality of all the life of all the people around you will be uplifted if you are a moksha purusha. And it is necessary for us to first become moksha purusha before we set out to help others. Right? Otherwise, many times what happens? When I am not qualified to help somebody, but I go and try to help them, what happens? I further complicate the problem and I become myself another problem in the problem, right? So this could happen. And that is why whenever you set out to help somebody, you have to make sure you are yourself competent and you will not further compound the problem. And then it is wise to set out to help. Otherwise, you will become an additional burden on the existing problem. So that is why we start working on ourselves. We start working on ourselves, make yourself more and more competent, and then you will be able to handle not just your problems, but the problems of the whole world. Then it is no more a problem for you. And that strength is moksha. Okay, so this is the purpose of the study. This is for moksha. Now, the next question that may come up is, for whom? Who are we doing all this for? Who is the target audience for this text? So he says, for the adhikari student. What is adhikari? Adhikari means the eligible student. So whenever we take up any task, we must have the eligibility for that task, right? Suppose you just pick up a random person from the road, put him in an aeroplane without any training, without any license, nothing. You just put him in the pilot seat and you tell him, you take this plane across the Atlantic. It's going to be a disaster, right? He doesn't know. He doesn't have the qualifications. He doesn't have the eligibility. So what do? What happens? They take a person, they give them training for many years, right? They teach them how to pilot a plane, how to, handle different situations in the plane. And once they have completed all their training, the required number of hours and all the testing, everything, finally they get their license. Then they are eligible to fly people wherever in the plane, right? So for any occupation or any study, anything, any activity, eligibility is necessary. And of course, for the Vedanta study also, eligibility is necessary. Now, what is that eligibility for Vedanta? The answer the author has given in the very first word. He says, sadhana chatushtaya. Sadhana chatushtaya sampanna. Sampanna means endowed with. So the one who is endowed with sadhana chatushtaya, the one who has sadhana chatushtaya, he is an adhikari student. Now the question is, what is sadhana chatushtaya? So we'll come to that. So this is about the eligibility for the text, the eligibility for studying Vedanta. And we need to know. Why we need to know? Not so that you can decide whether to continue from next class. That is not the purpose of knowing. You need to know so that you can think, how do I develop these qualities if I don't have them? If I have them, all well and good. If I don't have them, now I have to work on developing those qualities. I have to somehow bring those qualities into myself and become an adhikari and then continue the study. Okay, not so that you can simply drop off. That is not the idea. So I will give you a gist of who or what is an adhikari before we go to sadhana chatushtaya. So to tell you in just one line, the adhikari student is one who has a calm and composed mind. No matter what the situation is, the one who has a calm, focused mind is an adhikari student. Now in Sanskrit, we call this as Chitta Shuddhi. Chitta Shuddhi literally translates to mental purity, purity of the mind. Now, when it comes to any other object in the world, it is very easy to tell whether the object is pure or not. For example, if you have gold, you can test it. There are ways to test gold and say, okay, this is 98% pure. If there is a cloth and I say, is this a pure white cloth? Then you can look at the cloth and see if there is any discoloration, any dirt on it. And you can say, yes, this is a pure white cloth. Now, when it comes to the mind, how do you test the purity? The mind is invisible, right? So how do you go to somebody and test whether their mind is pure? What does it mean? Because purity, when it comes to mind, is a very vague word. It's a very abstract word. So we have a test. Yes, June.
Sorry. When the mind is desireless, with not so much cravings, and when it's filled with when sattva predominates in the mind, when you are more peaceful, when you have like titiksha, the stable mind under any circumstance.
Yes. So all those things are correct. As you said, a sattva predominant mind. But how do you know? Can you ask somebody, what is your sattva predominance? Are you sattva predominant? It is very difficult to identify, right? And even when it comes to ourselves, it is very difficult to identify. Why? Because we are biased. When it comes to me, it's very easy to say, yes, I am sattva predominant. But are we really? So how to identify? So there is a test for this, and it is called the FIR test. Okay, FIR means the frequency, intensity, and recovery time from emotional disturbances. Frequency. Frequency means how often the mind gets upset, whether it is depression or anger or jealousy or anything, some disturbing emotion in the mind. How frequently it comes? Does it come every hour? Does it come every day? Does it come once a week? Does it come once in a year? So how often does the mind get upset? That is frequency. Second is the intensity. To what degree it gets upset? Is it just a mild irritation? Or is it violent rage? Or is it even more and you actually become physically violent to other people? So there is a degree of the anger or the upset also, right? You can be mildly sad sometimes. And there are some people who get so depressed, they even commit suicide, right? Again, there is a degree here. So what is that degree? The intensity of the emotional disturbance. That is I, intensity. And R, R stands for recovery time. How much time it takes for you to get back to a normal state. Do you recover in just a few minutes? Do you recover after 2-3 hours? Do you recover after 2-3 days? And of course, there are some people, whole life, they never recover. They hold on to that one emotion or incident and allow it to disturb them for their whole life, right? So there is a very long recovery time for those people. So when we say FIR test, it means that all three, F, I, and R, should be low. And you can test this on yourself. So you can all take this as homework. Okay, so you can make a chart and make FIR, and every day you write down how many times in that day you were upset. I, intensity, you can have a scale of 1 to 10. I was upset 2, or I was upset 10, very upset. And recovery time, how much time it took you to get back to normal. Today it took me 3 hours to get back to normal. So every day make a chart and keep it as a journal. And then keep observing this over the next few months, over the next few years. And this should go on reducing. That is how you know the mind is becoming more pure. This is what we mean by Chitta Shuddhi, purity of mind. Mind is becoming more and more calm, more and more focused, more and more tranquil. The mind has developed emotional stability. It is not emotionally reactive to events of the world. And that is Chitta Shuddhi. And this is the main qualification required for the study of Vedanta, the calm mind. Now, why? Why do you require a calm mind to study Vedanta? Firstly, because in Vedanta, as we study, you will come across a lot of bitter truths about yourself, about life, about the world, about God. Okay, so a lot of notions that you hold dear are going to be disrupted as you go on. And for that, if every time that happens, you have an emotional reaction to that, then it is going to be very difficult to keep continuing, right? You are not going to like it. That is one reason. So a lot of bitter truths. Okay, first of all, we don't like talking about death, right? But in Vedanta, the topic of death is going to come up very frequently. And we're going to keep talking that not just my own death, but the death of close people around me. And we don't like to entertain such ideas in the mind, right? But this keeps coming up frequently. And if every time I have an emotional reaction to this, it is going to be very difficult for me to accept what Vedanta is saying. This is one of the reasons. Another reason is because every time the mind has an emotional reaction, you cannot focus. An emotionally disturbed mind cannot be a focused mind. If you can concentrate, you have to be able to put aside your emotions. You have to be able to put aside the disturbances. And this concentration, this focus is very necessary for the Vedantic study. Why? Because we are going to be delving into a very subtle topic, which is the nature of reality. And that requires extreme concentration. It is like, if you have some fruit and you want to cut the fruit and you need a knife. If the fruit is very soft, then even a blunt knife will do the trick, right? But if the fruit is a very hard fruit, have you ever cut a jackfruit? Anybody? You know that jackfruit is a very strong, hard fruit. You require a very sharp knife. Even apple is quite a hard fruit, right? For that also you require a strong knife, a sharp knife. Now to cut an apple, you require a sharp knife. Imagine the sharpness of the instrument required to cut into the Vedanta subject, because it is a very subtle, very intricate subject. So you are going to require an extremely sharp, equally subtle instrument, which is your mind. And that mind has to be focused, has to be sharp, has to be concentrated and calm. And for that, you need to have mastery over the mind. The mind needs to be its own master. If you let the emotions become the master, then it is going to be very difficult to continue in this subject. So this is why a calm mind is required. Okay. And this calmness of the mind is the main eligibility. The one who has a calm mind, a ready mind, a sharp intellect, the ability to concentrate, this person is called an adhikari. So your whole effort is in developing such a mind. And the rest, Vedanta will do by itself. You don't need to do much. Your only effort is to prepare your own mind. So another nice example given by Shastra is the soil and the seed. If you take a seed and you put it on the soil, what more do you have to do? Nothing. It grows by itself, right? You don't have to do anything. What is your responsibility? Just to make sure that the soil is in a ready state. The soil has to be fertile. You have to put water. You have to keep it ready for the seed. Then the seed will come and it will do its job. You don't need to do anything more, right? In the same way, all you have to do here is keep your mind ready. Then the teaching will come and do the job. Nothing more is required to be done by you. You just have to prepare your own mind. So this preparation of mind, ready mind, is what we call as Chitta Shuddhi. In fact, there are many names you will keep coming across. Chitta Shuddhi is one word. Samatvam is another word. Daivi Sampatti is another word. Sadhana Chatushtaya is one more word. Purity of mind, Jnana Yogyata. All of these are different words referring to the same thing, which is this prepared mind. Okay, so now we will look into what exactly are the qualifications needed by a prepared mind. So before that, any questions?
Medaji,
Yeah.
in the beginning of the class, you mentioned that Vasudevendra was the guru of the author of the book.
Yeah.
So this means that he's the guru of Adi Shankaracharya?
No, Adi Shankaracharya's guru was somebody else. So that is why I said there are two ways to look at it. If we accept that Adi Shankaracharya is the author of the book, then Vasudevendra means Krishna. Krishna has another name, which is Vasudev. So you can take it as Krishna. So he's bowing down to Krishna before starting his text. Or the more likely option is that it was not written by Adi Shankaracharya. It was written by some other Acharya in the tradition who had a guru called Vasudevendra.
Thank you.
Shankaracharya's guru's name was Govinda Bhagavad Padam, no? That's why in Bhaja Govindam, the Govindam refers to either Krishna or to his own guru. Bhaja Govindam, the text. So there, the Govindam refers to both of them, his guru as well as Bhagwan. Okay. Now we'll look at what is Sadhana Chatushtaya. Now, Tattvabodha is a text that is written in the form of question and answer. So there is an imaginary student who is asking questions, and there is the author who is the teacher who is giving the answers to these questions. So now that he has introduced the text, this imaginary student is popping up and he's asking a question. What exactly do you mean by Sadhana Chatushtaya? And the author is going to explain. So we can read this now. Sadhana Chatushtayam Kim?
Sadhana-chatushtayam kim?
Nitya Nitya Vastu Vivekaha. Iha Mutrartha Phala Bhoga Viragaha.
विरागः
इहामूत्रार्थ फलभोगविरागः शमादिषट्कसम्पत्तिः मुमुक्षुत्वं चेति Okay. So, student has asked the question, what is sadhana chatushtaya? Here the word sadhana means qualifications and the word chatushtaya means fourfold qualifications. So what are the fourfold eligibility criteria that I need for this study? This is the student's question. And the author has given the answer. He has listed 4 qualities that a student requires. The first one is called vivekaha. Second one is called viragaha. Third is shat sampatti. And the fourth is mumukshutvam. Okay. We'll see each of these. So right now he has given a brief introduction to each of these words, and then he explains a little bit in detail about each word, which comes later. So the first question is, so the first qualification is vivekaha. And he says, nitya anitya vastu vivekaha. So this big word actually breaks into smaller words, nitya, then anitya. Not again nitya, it is the opposite, anitya. Vastu and vivekaha. So there are 4 words here, nitya, anitya, vastu, vivekaha. So the word vivekaha means discrimination. Okay, and this is not discrimination in a negative sense. This is not the discrimination that comes in the newspaper. We are not talking about gender discrimination or those kind of discriminations. Here the word discrimination means the ability to differentiate, or you can say clarity or discernment. So the ability to differentiate between 2 different things. And what are those things? Here he says nitya vastu and anitya vastu. So that intellectual discrimination or that intellectual clarity between what is anitya vastu and what is nitya vastu is called as vivekaha. Now what is the meaning of nitya? Nitya means permanent. Anitya means impermanent. So eternal, non-eternal, permanent, temporary. So the ability to differentiate between an object, whether it is temporary or whether it is permanent. This is called as vivekaha. Now, why do we need to know whether an object is permanent or temporary? It is so that we can have the right expectation from the correct object. If you expect permanent happiness from an impermanent object, is that intelligence or foolishness? Expecting permanent happiness from an impermanent object.
That is not possible to expect anything from an impermanent thing, because it is not permanent. It's gonna change, or it's gonna.
Yes. So why should you not expect happiness from or permanent happiness from such an object?
Because whatever is impermanent can never give permanent happiness.
Yes.
Because it is itself not permanent, right?
Yeah.
How can it give you permanent happiness when it is itself not permanent?
Yes.
It is one day going to be destroyed or gone. And now remember, when I say object, I also mean people. I also mean relationships. It is not just the non-living objects. It is also all the living people and also all the relationships in your life. So Can we expect permanent happiness from any of these things, whether it is an object or whether it is a person or a relationship, whether it is money or a car or a house? Can any of these things actually give me permanent happiness?
No.
No, because they will themselves one day not be here. There is a very great likelihood that these objects will change or be destroyed. And that day, if I am dependent on this object for my permanent happiness, it's going to be a problem because the object is itself not there. How can it give me happiness? So, expecting the wrong thing from the wrong source, this is a foolish thing to do. The intelligent person would expect correct things from the correct source. So I'm not saying that don't enjoy the object or don't derive happiness from an object. You can derive temporary happiness from the object with full awareness that this is temporary happiness. But we don't do that. We start expecting permanent happiness, right? That is the problem. Not getting happiness from the object. You can have an object and you can enjoy it, no problem, but expecting that it will permanently be there to give you that same kind of happiness, that is the problem. So Vedanta never says don't enjoy the object or don't get happiness from an object. Get happiness, but with the full awareness that this is a temporary happiness. It is going to change. That object, there is a very likely chance that it is going to go away.
Vedaji, can I say something here?
Yes.
Now we talk about permanent happiness from impermanent things. That is not possible. Yes, agreed. But there are many things in life which are of very long, which lasts for long period. So we can expect permanent happiness, permanent in the sense that for our lifetime. For example, if I'm living in a good house, my house is not going to break up in years to come. I can be there permanently there, permanent for my life period. Okay.
If all goes well, your house will be permanently there, but there's no guarantee, no? Anything can happen to any building, any structure. There are a lot of natural disasters also that can happen, right?
True, but to assume that they will happen to us is rather not fair, no? It's like me saying if I go on the road, there will be an accident. No, accidents do happen on road, but they happen with me, not necessarily.
Not
Otherwise, I'll never
necessarily,
go on the
but
road.
see, this is the thing that a lot of people, I'm not saying all the time think about accidents or natural disasters or all those things, but people always usually think, okay, it may not happen to me. There's a very slight chance it may happen. And because of that, there is an expectation that this thing is going to be permanent. And by chance, if it happens, then there will be a great mental devastation, right? It can happen to anybody. We don't know. Nobody knows their own future, right? We don't know what could happen. That is one point. Second point, fine. Let us say the house is all right. Okay, but one of the biggest relationships you have in this life is with your own body. Can you guarantee that your own body is permanent and it will stay the same way till the end of your life?
No, it will go through changes as we have accepted it. We have different challenges at different life stages, and we accept that, isn't it? We don't say that we will be the same energetic like we were in our youth.
This is what I'm saying, the acceptance. But there is still a gap over there.
That.
There is a gap between that intellectual understanding and that emotional reaction. We all know that the body is going to age, the body may fall sick, the body can get diseases, and one day the body will die. The body may even experience pain before it dies. Intellectually, all of us are aware. But one white hair comes, and what is the emotional reaction to that? The intellectual understanding and the emotional reaction are not in sync. There is a gap.
Okay.
We all have the intellectual understanding that things are impermanent, right? Body is itself impermanent. Body will itself decay and die one day. But when that situation comes, how many of us are able to accept it gracefully? And how many people actually suffer Intellectually, they know, yes, it is a body, it will die, it will decay. But emotionally, they do suffer, right? Why is there a gap between the the intellectual understanding and the emotional reaction when it actually happens?
I thought others around us suffer more than we may go through when we are about to die. We would have gone. I don't know how we feel then, but people around us, they may be more affected by our absence.
That is why I said it includes all your relationship also. It is not just your own body, it is also the bodies of all the people around you.
Okay.
So even
you.
their bodies will decay and die. And we will
Yes.
have to watch, maybe. And are we prepared for that? Even that is an impermanent thing, right? All the relationships that we have in life are also impermanent. Either their body will one day drop or my body will one day drop, right? In any case, it is impermanent. This
Yes.
understanding has to come about very strongly. That is Vivekaha. Identifying all these impermanent things in life and making it sync with my emotional reaction. Intellectually, you know, when there's a funny saying, they say that when it happens in the neighbor's house, when a death happens in the neighbor's house, it's very easy to go there and comfort them. Arey, death is a part of life. You know, you can tell them all these things. But when it happens in your own house, can you tell that to yourself? That is the question. Right. Now, so that is Vivekaha. So we are not saying don't enjoy the objects. We are not saying don't, you know, you have to cut out from all objects of life. That is not possible. It is not practical. But enjoy the objects with the full knowledge that they are impermanent objects. They are transient. And one day they will not be here.
Vedaji, may I ask something?
Yeah.
Reverential attachment to the Guru, how does it work for this? Guru is also not.
Initially, the reverence and the, what do you say, the loyalty, the devotion to the Guru must be there. Initially, it is a stepping stone. But eventually, as you progress, as you become an advanced student, your vision shifts from the teacher to the teaching. Then it is not about any one individual or their physical form. It is about the teaching.
Minimized, right? Even their attachment should be minimized.
Yes. It is very interesting to see, if you see SPG, Swami Paramarthananda's reaction when his close Guru Bhai passed away, attained Mahasamadhi. There was a video or a small talk that SPG gave and which came out. And if you see, it is very beautiful. I don't know, I think they removed it now, that little talk that he gave. So SPG is, of course, a Jnani, and the reaction or the little talk that he has given upon his friends passing away, it is very beautiful. You can see that he has assimilated the whole knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
If I can find it, I'll share it, but I think they have removed it now.
Yeah, please do me that.
What did he
Please
say?
do share.
Sorry?
So what did he say when his friend passed away?
I don't remember the exact thing now. I'll try to find it. If I find it, I will share it with you.
I have a doubt. So you
Yeah.
told that we should be able to discern between what is permanent and impermanent. So there are many things in life which we look forward for security. So constantly we don't keep thinking, right? Or or how do we approach it? We are supposed to say, wow, this is awesome, but this is impermanent. Isn't it a way of us channeling our ideas into thinking how and all it can get destroyed? And that would steal away the happiness of the enjoying the joys that the objects are bringing at the current situation?
There is a fundamental flaw you have made in this question. And that is the assumption that you need security from outside. And this is that fundamental flaw that we are going to fix in Vedanta. You don't need security from outside. The feeling that I am inadequate, I lack something, and that is why I need something from outside to become more secure. This is a false notion. And
Even
this,
food. Okay.
The body needs food, but are
Yeah.
you the body is the question.
Okay, currently I don't know what else I am other than the body. So I would say I am the body for now.
Yes. And this notional correction is what we are going to do in Vedanta. The fundamental flaw that I am the body, and because I am the body, I have accepted the problems of the body as my own problems. Because the body falls sick, I say I am sick. Right? That is not the case. The body has fallen sick. Body will go through all these problems. But are you the body? That is the question.
Okay, if we are in the body also, we are currently living in the system, or we are currently there. So it is our responsibility to take care of it, right?
Yes. But it is your responsibility to take care of it. Again, with the knowledge that it is not a permanent system. One day it will also fall. That is
Okay.
why I said bitter truths. One day this body will also fall, no matter how well you take care of it. And in fact, even if you do your best and take care of it, still there is a chance that it may suffer before it drops. But just because the body suffers, does it mean you have to suffer? So these are the ideas that we will discuss in great detail in the coming classes. So what is the time? Okay, we still have a few minutes, and I will finish off these points. Then we can have some questions. So the first one is Vivekaha, which is the discriminative knowledge between the impermanent and permanent objects and expecting the correct thing from the correct source. Okay, it is not correct to blame the changing world. The nature of the world is to change, but it is my foolish expectation to expect that I will get permanent happiness from this changing world. So I need to address and change that, and having this firm understanding, having this clarity, that is Vivekaha. The second qualification is Viragaha, or also called Vairagyam. So this
Please repeat again, please. Viveka is?
Vivekaha means the discrimination between the permanent and impermanent objects. Having clarity on the correct expectation from the correct source. Okay. So Viragaha. Viragaha is also called as Vairagyam. Vairagyam means dispassion. Now, there are a lot of misunderstandings about this word Viragaha, and we are going to discuss them in great detail in the next class. The correct meaning of the word Viragaha is dispassion, not just dispassion, but not being an emotional slave to objects of the world. Again, we don't say you can't enjoy the objects of the world. You can, but with total mastery, not by becoming an addict to the objects of the world. So getting rid of the cravings. It is like the difference between an addict of any of the substances, the narcotic substances, versus a non-addict. The person who becomes an addict, it is going to be a very difficult life for him, right? But here we are saying that you need to have total mastery, and that is Vairagyam. Whether the object is there or not there, it doesn't make a difference. If it is there, enjoy it. If it is not there, still it's okay. Still no difference to your enjoyment. Now, there are two kinds of pleasures that people seek in life. One is Iha and another is Amutra. Okay, so two words here, Iha and Amutra. Iha means here and now. That means in this world. Amutra means later. So you can take it to mean somewhere in the future. Another meaning is there are a lot of people who believe in heaven, Swarga. And they feel that they have to do things here in this life to attain Swarga. So there is a desire for the enjoyments of Swargaloka as well, in some later world, in some later life. So that is called as amutra. So whether it is the desire for enjoyment here and now, or whether it is the desire for enjoyment in the later world, in a later loka, both of those cravings have to be dropped. A de-addiction has to take place. Okay, again, I will say that if the pleasure comes your way, no harm in enjoying it, but the craving has to stop. That is Vairagyam. Okay, we'll discuss more in detail in the next class. Then the third one is Shat Sampatti. Shat Sampatti, Sampatti means wealth, and Shatka means 6. So the 6 types of inner wealth. And what is this wealth in the form of? In the form of inner discipline. So there are 6 types of inner disciplines that a seeker must have, and they are Shama Adi, Shama, etc. So Shama, Dama, Uparama. So we will see the list later. So there are 6, starting with Shama. Adi means etc. So this inner wealth, the student must have. And the last one is Mumukshutvam, a strong desire for moksha. And this Mumukshutvam is probably the most important of the sadhana chatushtaya. Because without Mumukshutvam, there can be no study, there can be no desire to progress in this. But once this Mumukshutvam is very strong, all the others can be acquired. All the other sadhana chatushtaya can be acquired, but this Mumukshutvam needs to be there and it needs to be strong. And it is a very necessary qualification, because only to a person who wants to learn, you can teach. If somebody doesn't want to learn, you cannot teach. For a transaction, 2 sides are there, 2 entities are there. The one who gives the knowledge and the one who receives the knowledge. And the one who receives the knowledge has to be open to receiving the knowledge. Then only it is possible. And that is why Mumukshutvam is a very important qualification. Then Cheti. Cheti is not one more qualification. It just means Cha iti. Cha means and. In Sanskrit, it means and. So this whole list is basically with and. So in Sanskrit, we don't say, in English, we say Rama and Lakshmana and Sita, right? And comes between the words. But in Sanskrit, the and comes at the end of the list. So Ramaha Lakshmana cha means it's the same, Rama and Lakshmana. Iti means in this manner, this is the list. These are the 4 qualifications. So in detail, the author is himself going to discuss in the next class. So we will see there. Yeah, any questions? We have few minutes.
So Medhaji, this second word, Iha Mutrartha Phala Bhoga Viraga, in this, the Iha Loka Bhoga is experiences in this life, and Mutrartha is Paraloka Bhoga.
Yes, Paraloka Bhoga.
Okay. Thank
Phala
you.
Bhoga. Bhoga means to enjoy or experience, and phala is the fruits of one's own actions. And here we are talking about the positive, the enjoyments.
Yes,
Nobody
yes.
wants to go through pain, right? So we are here referring to the enjoyments only.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. With respect to pain, there is already vairagya. Nobody wants pain. It is only with respect to the pleasurable experiences that we have to develop vairagya. Yes. Anything else? Okay. Total silence.
Absorbing.
Okay. So it takes time to understand and assimilate, and also, really absorb these truths, because we don't like being told that you are impermanent, your body is impermanent, your relationships are impermanent. So it takes a little time and we have to digest it. And in the next class, we will continue. We will see more of the details of all of these 4. And I think we can stop here. If anyone wants to ask anything, we can take 1 or 2 more questions and then we can stop.
Bhumidaji,
Yeah.
so can we call ourselves early mumukshus?
In Mumukshus also, there are 3 levels, Manda,
Yeah.
Tivra and Madhyama. Tivra is a
Right.
very intense Mumukshu, a very strong desire, burning desire. Madhyama is medium, so. And Manda is little weak, very weak. If something else comes, they may easily get distracted. So again, 3 levels of Mumukshus.
Thank
And
you.
we have to, if we are at Manda by chance, then you have to progress to Madhyama and finally to Tivra. You have to develop the Tivra Mumukshutvam.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes. Sorry. Okay, I'm not able to hear. Are you asking something?
એના પગની ટ્રીટમેન્ટ મારે જાય 9 થી 10 તમે આપતી જશે.
Okay, we can end the class with the prayer.
ની મમ્મીએ પૂછ્યું કે કોણ ભાઈ છે? મેં તો મારા ભાઈ છે. ને ખબર છે કે મેં
Purnamidam Purnat
Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnamevavasishyate Shanti Shanti Hari Gurubhyo Namah Harihi Om Tat Sat Om Namah Shivaya.
Thank you.
Om Namah
Thank you,
Shivaya.
Medaji.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Medaji.
Thank you, Medaji.
Thank you.
Thank you, Medaji.
Thank you, Medaji.
Bye.